Look,
for a deal?
if we don't take Greenland, Russia or China will. And I'm not letting that happen.
Is there any deal they can offer you? Either like
Yeah, sure, I'd love to make a deal with them. It's easier. But one way or the other, we're going to have Greenland.
When a head of state says, one way or the other, it is not casual language. In geopolitics, those words mean the decision has already been made. Only the method is undecided. That phrase is a signal, a warning, and sometimes a countdown. Because when Donald Trump used it in reference to Greenland, he wasn't negotiating. He was framing inevitability. And that is where this becomes dangerous. Greenland is not a symbolic prize. It is not a bargaining chip. It is one of the most strategically decisive pieces of territory on the planet. And what most coverage misses is this. The statement was not aimed at Greenland. It was aimed at Europe. To understand why, you have to strip away the headlines and look at the board. Greenland sits at the geographic hinge between North America, the Arctic, and Europe. It controls access to the GIUK Gap, the maritime corridor between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom that NATO has treated for decades as a front line against adversary submarines. Greenland is formally an autonomous territory of Denmark. That legal status matters, because it means any attempt to bypass Copenhagen directly challenges European sovereignty. And this is where the phrase, one way or the other, changes meaning. In diplomatic language, it suggests three layers of pressure. The first is political inevitability, the idea that resistance is pointless because the outcome is predetermined. The second is economic leverage, trade access, security guarantees, investment flows, sanctions by omission rather than action. The third layer, the one never stated aloud, is strategic coercion, not invasion, not occupation, but the slow tightening of choices until only one path remains viable. This is the same logic used in past power expansions, not through tanks crossing borders, but through redefining what borders can realistically refuse. But here's the part no one is discussing. This statement did not emerge in a vacuum. Over the past decade, Arctic militarization has accelerated quietly. Russia has reopened Soviet-era bases along its northern coast. China, despite having no Arctic coastline, labels itself a near-Arctic state and invests in polar research, dual-use infrastructure, and icebreaker fleets. The United States already maintains a military presence in Greenland, but presence is not control. And in geopolitical terms, presence without control is vulnerability. This is where the logic hardens. From a purely strategic perspective, allowing Greenland to drift, politically, economically, or diplomatically, creates uncertainty in missile defense, early warning systems, and Arctic sea lane dominance. And uncertainty is intolerable to planners. So when the phrase one way or the other is used, it is not emotional. It is procedural. It signals that planners are moving from whether to how, and that creates a far more dangerous problem, because Greenland is not an adversary. Denmark is not an adversary. They are allies. Which means this is not about confrontation. It is about hierarchy. In alliances, power is often invisible, until it is asserted. And this is an assertion. Compare this moment to earlier historical precedents. During the Cold War, the United States pressured allies quietly, through closed-door diplomacy. Red lines existed, but they were masked by consensus language. This time, the language is public. Deliberately so. That changes the dynamic. Public language forces public reactions. Public reactions harden positions, and hardened positions reduce maneuvering space. For Denmark, backing down openly creates domestic legitimacy problems. For Greenlandic leadership, acquiescence raises existential questions about self-determination. For Europe, silence signals acceptance of precedent. and precedent is the real battlefield here. If an alliance leader can declare inevitability over allied territory, even rhetorically, it rewrites the rules of sovereignty inside security blocs. This is where the situation becomes unstable. Because once inevitability is declared, any resistance, even symbolic, becomes framed as obstruction, and obstruction invites escalation. Not military escalation at first, but diplomatic isolation, economic pressure, security conditionality. The tools are subtle, the effects are not. Now consider why this moment is different from 2019, when Greenland was first mentioned casually. Back then, it was treated as eccentricity, a real estate metaphor applied clumsily to geopolitics. Now, the language is sharper, the context is harsher, and the global environment is far less forgiving. NATO is already strained. European defense autonomy debates are accelerating. Trust is thinner than it appears. Which brings us to the alliance itself. NATO is built on the assumption that disputes are resolved internally, quietly, and consensually. The moment inevitability replaces consensus, the alliance shifts from cooperative security to managed compliance. And that shift is not theoretical. If Greenland becomes a test case where pressure works, then the model can be reused elsewhere. Not necessarily by the same actor, but by others watching closely. That is why this statement is being parsed word by word in European capitals. Now, what happens next depends on which path is chosen. There are three realistic scenarios. The first is diplomatic absorption. In this scenario, pressure is applied through security guarantees, investment promises, and political signaling until Denmark and Greenland align with expanded U.S. control arrangements, formally voluntary, functionally irreversible. This avoids open conflict. It preserves alliance optics, but it establishes a precedent where choice exists only on paper. The second scenario is strategic friction. Here, Denmark resists publicly. Greenlandic leaders emphasize autonomy. Europe closes ranks rhetorically. This slows the process, but raises the temperature. It increases the risk of retaliatory pressure, not dramatic, but cumulative. And it injects instability into NATO coordination at a time when unity is already strained. The third scenario is recalibration. Quiet back-channel negotiations redefine the scope of control without changing sovereignty language. Expanded basing rights, enhanced missile defense integration, permanent infrastructure investments. This scenario looks calm, but it still shifts the balance of authority. In all three cases, the outcome moves in the same direction. Only the speed and visibility differ, and that is the core meaning of the phrase. One way or the other is not a threat of invasion. It is a declaration of trajectory. It tells allies and adversaries alike that a strategic decision has passed the debate phase. What remains is execution. The final intelligence drop is this: geopolitics is not shaped by dramatic moments. It is shaped by phrases that redefine what is considered possible and what is considered futile to resist. When inevitability enters the language, leverage has already shifted, and once leverage shifts, maps follow. What happens next will not just determine Greenland's future, it will reveal how power now moves inside alliances and who truly gets to say no.